Support for WAMU comes from the Alliance of Community Health Plans, in appreciation for WAMU's commitment to create a more informed public. We are the Alliance of Community Health Plans, and we are proud to stand with our nonprofit members in transforming healthcare.
From WAMU 88.5 at American University in Washington, welcome to the Politics Hour, starring Tom Sherwood. I'm Kojo Nnamdi. Tom Sherwood is our resident analyst and contributing writer for Washington City Paper. Tom Sherwood, welcome.
Hello, everybody.
Later in the broadcast, we'll be joined by Matt DeFerranti, who is the chair of the Arlington County Board. Right now, joining us is Phil Mendelson, chairman of the D.C. Council. Chairman Mendelson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. Good to be here. Hello, everybody.
Chairman Mendelson, we don't have a great deal of time, so I'm going to jump right into it. It's my understanding that on Friday, just before the show, the council has a COVID-19 call with D.C. Health. Do you have any updates for us?
Not especially. The data is getting a little bit better. That is that it appears that the latest surge has spiked and is coming down. There were a lot of questions concerning procedures and what's the deal with the booster shots. How's that going to roll out? But I'm not going to speak to that because I don't want to get it wrong. Department of Health will have guidance on the coronavirus.dc.gov website.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for being on the show today. The big issue, I think you held a 7-hour hearing. You're the chair of the Committee on Education. You had a 7-hour hearing. You heard from a lot of parents and their various school officials and staff people. They're concerned that the approach to COVID-19 is inconsistent in the school system. I will note I've looked around the country and in the suburbs, and there are many school systems that are struggling with the students who are being infected and staffs being infected. Still fairly small numbers overall, but after you had that 7-hour hearing, is there anything you can say or do to ease the anxiety of both parents, students, and staff?
Well, gosh, it's tough to answer that because the anxiety is understood. Folks are very nervous about the pandemic. The fact is that kids in elementary school cannot be vaccinated. So you've got a large number of kids who are unvaccinated. And what does this mean? It would appear that generally what the DCPS and the charter schools are doing is consistent with CDC guidance, but there is some inconsistency between schools. And I have said, I think that our school officials need to be a bit more flexible with regard to how rigid they are and who would qualify for virtual learning as opposed to in-school learning. I think there needs to be just a bit more flexibility
and more communication
on their part.
And more communication.
Yeah, communication is a big problem, particularly with DCPS, and that makes things a lot worse.
Well, during the hearing, the union representing school principals said that contact tracing has fallen to individual schools. Are you getting the sense that a lot of responsibilities associated with reopenings are being left to individual schools with little guidance from the school system?
I get a sense that a lot is being put on the individual schools. Yes, there is guidance, and I think that where we see things falling apart is that not every school, just as individuals in a group, do things exactly the same way, and that inconsistency is driving parents crazy, and that's understandable. We need to be mindful, how much do we want schools to be accountable as opposed to they're not responsible and everything should be central administration? I talked with a principal earlier in the week before the hearing who did make the observation that as principal, he's the school leader, and yet he has to spend his weekend instead of educational planning doing contact tracing calls. So there needs to be more support for our schools.
Another big issue in this city, Mr. Chairman, is crime. As you well know, the homicide rate is up at least 13% this year. The number of shootings, I tried to look online for spot shotter information, because there just seems to be shootings all over town now. People are worried about it. As you well know, last year during the George Floyd aftermath, the hyper worried situation there, the council passed legislation, emergency legislation, trimming some of the things the police could do, trimming number of people who would be hired. None of that legislation, as I understand it, is permanent, and that the temporary legislation that the council passed runs out in October. The Police Reform Commission has put up its recommendations of what things should be done. There has been no council hearings on all of this. Is the council going to hold new public hearings on policing before it just simply renews the temporary legislation? What's going to happen?
Well, there actually is a hearing that the Judiciary Committee has scheduled somewhere around October 26th, and I don't have the date in front of me, but it is on 3 bills that come out of the recommendations of the Police Reform Commission. I can't speak to the full hearing schedule of the Judiciary Committee. I will say that, the recommendations of the Police Reform Commission primarily have to do with improving policing and improving accountability for policing, and that's important. But when we talk about concern over violent crime, that's a different issue, if you will, and that is, are we responding the right way? In my view, smart policing, are we doing enough smart policing to reduce violent crime?
Well, we've seen the mayor develop a new initiative putting resources in the city's most gun violence-prone neighborhoods, and D.C. Police Chief Robert Contee, he has launched community-focused patrol units. Do you see any of those solutions as working?
I'm not going to say that those solutions, those initiatives are wrong, but I do think that there needs to be more focus on known repeat offenders. The Criminal Justice Coordinating Council last week gave a presentation, I'm on that council, about statistically how much of our violent crime is by a relatively few known individuals. As I recall, it was a small number that were responsible for several hundred arrests over the past year, maybe 2 years. It was really quite shocking. And so what it points to is the need for more focused policing on known offenders, and not just policing, but the entire criminal justice system responding. If somebody who's been arrested for gun charges and for violent crime, let's say a dozen times, and yes, there's some dozen times, that person probably, when they're arrested, should be held instead of released. It is a condition for holding somebody pretrial that they are a risk to the community. And so all the agencies need to step up and focus on individuals. In my view, that would be smart policing, and that could have a significant effect.
And it's lastly on this subject, I think the police are down like 200 officers. I think there's a general view that you have to do two things. You have to have police on the street to respond to crime as much as prevent it, and also you have to do all the social issues to steer people away from crime. And there's some concern that the police department is inhibited from doing some of its work because of the bad stuff that police have done in the past. So I look forward to seeing what you do about that. Can I do some quick political questions?
Well, let me ask one more police-related question
You're the host.
first. 10 black women who are current and former D.C. police officers are bringing a class action lawsuit against the city. They're alleging racial discrimination and sexual harassment. What do you know about the case?
Well, I don't know much about the case, and I'm certainly not going to prejudge whether they're correct, but I am very disturbed that there would be those allegations. There certainly is there has to be enough merit to the allegations that they're able to bring forth a complaint in court. So even if the city is able to defend its way out of it, and I don't know that it can, it's still concerning that that there's something going on, that those allegations could be made in the first place.
Have you heard about these allegations before? Because I read the lawsuits, and it said that at least one of the police officers, who I won't name at this point, made several complaints to the council and never got, apparently, a response from them. Were you aware of this issue before?
No, but I don't chair the Judiciary Committee. It was a decade ago that I did. So the complaints wouldn't have been made to me. They would have been made to the committee. And I don't know. I can't speak to that. I do know there have been allegations in the past. You know, the former chief, Kathy Lanier, before she became chief, I think when she was still a parole officer, had filed a complaint. So it's not new in that sense. It shouldn't be happening. Let me be very clear about that. Whether the allegations are upheld by the court, it's still, to me, disturbing that there's enough of some sort of behavior going on that the allegations could be brought in the first place.
Are you surprised that there are as many as 10 women police officers who have brought this lawsuit, totaling 235 years of service, just about all of them with the exception of one having served 15 years or more?
I'm not sure how to answer that. I mean, if it was one officer complaining, that would have a different effect. The fact that it's 10 speaks to something that might be pervasive, a culture that might be pervasive that needs to be addressed.
And one last thing on policing, that highly touted NBC4 did an investigation, said that highly touted thing where the U.S. Attorney and D.C. police would go after gun crimes and be tougher on gun people, that seems to have fallen by the wayside while there were more than 100.
You're talking about in the federal court cases?
Yeah, the federal court cases where the mayor stood up with the U.S. Attorney, Lou, at the time, and they're going to make a federal effort on getting guns off the street. Well, so far this year, NBC4 says there's been like 20 cases compared to more than 100 in previous years. Let me ask you a couple of political questions.
Well, no, if I could just say that I think it was hyperbole when it was announced a few years ago. I mean, really kind of more for show. And so if it's like kind of fallen by the wayside, that's not a surprise.
That's a concern. We are talking about politics the coming year, the schools, COVID, all the crime will be an issue in the upcoming races. I did a story this week for the City paper. Carl Racine, the Attorney General, gave a speech at UDC. He laid out a perfect campaign for mayor if he should run. Do you have any indication he's going to run or not run?
I don't know. There's more speculation about him than I think anybody else.
Well, that's because
he keeps bringing it up. He's going to be mayor. He's going to be running for re-election.
Which raises the issue, Mr. Sherwood. What's a perfect campaign?
Well, I mean, he laid out 4 issues like housing, police, discrimination, gentrification. It was a 15-minute speech. It sounded like a campaign kickoff. The other one for politics is Kenya McDuffie, the Ward 5 council member. There's severe discussions among some of his own friends that he's not going to run for the council again. Do you know whether he is?
I don't know. And he's not told me a decision that he's made.
What do you know? Have you been talking to anybody at all?
And when is the mayor going to? Yes, and when is the mayor going to make her announcements? Should be, I'm told, in the next few weeks or months.
Well, the mayor hasn't told me when she's going to make her announcement, but I expect that she will be running for re-election.
Earlier this month, Mayor Bowser declared a state of emergency to extend a contract with MedStar. That's the company that manages the care of some 60,000 D.C. Medicaid patients. MedStar originally planned to end its contract since a judge found that the city violated procurement rules by offering the contract to MedStar in the first place, but it's my understanding that the council is trying to block the mayor's extension of the contract. Can you tell us about that and remind us of what role MedStar plays for the city's low-income residents? And exactly what does the council want at this point?
Well, I think what the council wants at this point is that the law is followed. There was a disapproval resolution filed a week ago. The purpose of that was to buy time. When contracts under the Home Rule Act, contracts over $1 million have to come to the council. These contracts are for, I believe, $1.3 billion each. $1.3 billion. And so they come over to the council for a 10-day review period. We asked our general counsel if because there were some attributes to this proposal that seemed a little strange, our general counsel issued an opinion that the contracts actually exceeded the mayor's authority because of the way that they were structured. So a disapproval was introduced in order to extend the 10 days, give us time through the October 5th legislative meeting to deal with this. I've reached out to the executive to offer a solution that would not be illegal. And last night I received a letter from the mayor rejecting that proposal. And today I learned that without the council approval. The mayor's gone ahead and executed the contracts. I have to say, I cannot think of a bigger mess, a better way to mishandle something. We know there's going to be litigation. There's already been litigation. When you have a $1.3 billion contract, and there are three of them, you know that people are willing to go to court. And so one of the bidders is going to, without question, is going to go to court. I think already has been. And they're going to challenge what the mayor's doing. And our own general counsel says that the mayor exceeded her authority. Let me explain real briefly. The mayor has refused to go along with a ruling from the Contract Appeals Board last December that said reevaluate the bids. Just do a reevaluation. That's all you have to do. Take a week or two to do it. Hasn't done it. Then the mayor declares an emergency saying, guess what? These contracts are about to expire, and so I'm declaring a public emergency. And then she sends down renewals of the contracts, not emergency contracts, but renewals of the contracts that the Contract Appeals Board had ordered her to reevaluate instead. So now, executing the contracts without the council's even going through the review process of the council, I think that this is, I wouldn't even call it thin ice. I'd say it's no ice that the mayor's standing on here. And if I sound disturbed about it, I am, because it's implicating the council's authority, and I can't abide that.
Here's the bottom line. No one can understand unless you're involved in those three contracts. Let me just ask this question. If the contract issue is not settled, would the thousands of people on Medicaid be lost and will not be getting the Medicaid services that they get from doctors and hospitals and medical facilities? Will they be hurt by this, or will they simply get that care and there will be some question about who's going to get paid? Are there people going to be hurt?
Shouldn't be. But given how the mayor's handled this, I mean, we are, just because we're elected doesn't mean we don't have to follow the law. And there are ways that we can do things within the law. The mayor can do emergency contracts.
Mr. Chairman.
So no, people shouldn't be hurt by this.
So the people, if you, let me just make it clear, if you're on Medicaid and you have medical issues, you should still go to see a doctor and go to a hospital.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's good.
Oh, I thought you had another question.
No, I was just trying to be clear about the people who are being suffered by this.
At some point, a judge is going to step in and say what you're doing is illegal and you have to stop doing it. And I don't know what that means. Does that mean then that because this is going to go to court, if a judge does that, does that mean then that the people will lose access to services? Or does it mean that instead the city's going to have to, I don't know, convert to fee for service and cost, I heard one estimate, $40 million. $40 million is not budgeted.
Okay.
Well, we only have about a minute left. This week, the Wendy's location in the center of the infamous Dave Thomas Circle shut down because D.C. is claiming eminent domain. By the way, have you ever enjoyed a Frosty at that Wendy's location?
Ever? I don't know.
Come on, the Frosty is more memorable than that.
Drunken late night?
No, I don't have drunken late nights, Tom. I'm an elected official.
Well, the fast food chain is now suing the city to demolish the building and to compensate the chain for restaurant relocation. And quoting here, the lost name and business association between the Dave Thomas Circle and the Wendy's brand. Have you reviewed that lawsuit, and what do you make of it?
No, I have not. But you know, when the city does eminent domain, it has to pay. It has to pay the value of the land, and it could be that there would be damages because of an adverse impact on the business. I mean, that is... Eminent domain comes with a price.
Phil Mendelson, chairman of the D.C. Council. Chairman Mendelson, thank you very much for joining us.
Was there another fast clock today, Kojo?
It's another fast clock because today's the last day of our fall membership campaign, so we've got to take a break right now. I can't even allow you to say goodbye again. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Tom Sherwood is our resident analyst and contributing writer for Washington City Paper. And joining us now is Matt DeFerranti, the chair of the Arlington County Board. Matt DeFerranti, thank you very much for joining us.
Good to be with you, Kojo. And Tom.
Before we start speaking specifically with Matt DeFerranti about Arlington County, let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the election coming up in Virginia, where it's my understanding that people have started voting already in the governor's race, but polls show that the race is a lot tighter than was initially anticipated when McAuliffe, at first, the former Governor Terry McAuliffe, looked like he was running away. But now polls show that Glenn Youngkin, the Republican candidate, is drawing a lot closer. What's going on?
Well, Terry McAuliffe did run away with the Democratic nomination earlier this year, but the race against Republican Glenn Youngkin is closer. Even 4 years ago, Ralph Northam, the Democrat, ran a close race to win. Bottom line is the Washington Post poll and there's only been one poll that shows the Republican Glenn Youngkin ahead. That was the University of Mary Washington. The bottom line is the Democrats are fearful that Democrats are not excited. There's an enthusiasm gap that the Democrats have won so much since 2009 that they are not getting out to support Mitch. I'm sorry, I'm getting the names mixed up. I got so many names here in front of me. Terry McAuliffe. On the other hand, Glenn Youngkin, who's a new face in politics, has given new life to the Republican Party. But he has a problem, and it's a Trump problem. Virginia is not a welcoming state for President Trump, former President Trump. Trump was on the radio again in Fredericksburg this week saying that Youngkin needs to be more Make America Great Again.
He's got to get on the MAGA train.
I didn't want to say MAGA. You can say it. And also Youngkin there's the other polling from the Post that people very strongly support vaccine mandates and mask mandates for this COVID thing. 9 out of 10 people in Northern Virginia support more aggressive mask and vaccines. So those are issues that could hurt Glenn Youngkin because he's against vaccine mandates and he's against abortion. And so all these issues that are rumbling out there, the question is, will the Democrats shake off their lethargy and get their voters to the polls the election's November 2nd.
Matt DeFerranti, what say you?
Well, I think it's going to be a closer race than we would hope. I supported Mr. McAuliffe in the primary, and I think we need to keep in mind that Trump got 44% of the vote in Virginia, and that is about as low, in my view, at the moment as you could go. And so Mr. Youngkin is a formidable challenger. We can win this race if we turn out voters. And I'm really thrilled that the Democrats in Virginia vastly expanded early voting times to provide more of an opportunity so we get more voters.
As we said, our guest is Matt DeFerranti, chair of the Arlington County Board. Arlington County has a new look, a brand new logo. The county board voted to approve the new logo last Saturday. Can you describe it for our listeners, and can you remind us of why Arlington was creating a new logo in the first place? Around these parts, no logo meets approval unless Tom Sherwood likes it. But first, you.
Sure. So the logo is in the shape of a diamond that was the original geographic area of D.C. There's spaces that were Arlington, the district, separated by the Potomac River and part of Alexandria. The Arlington geography in that diamond is highlighted and stands out both in our colored version, which is blue and white, as well as in our black and white version, where it's going to be a darker shade. So that reflects our history. It's also much more inclusive, and we're so pleased to move forward. The last logo was based on the Arlington House, which is Congress declared the Robert E. Lee home in 1972 or 1973. We felt we had to have a more inclusive logo to reflect all of Arlington and to move away from an individual who is inextricably linked with inhumanity and slavery. And so we were proud to move forward. I think we've seen some good feedback so far, and looking forward to more over time.
Well, I want to note, I just tweeted the picture of the new logo. If you follow me on Twitter, you can see the Arlington logo. However, Martin Ostermuir, a reporter here at DCIS and WAMU, tweeted that
Never heard of him.
The logo looks like you're trying to rejoin the District of Columbia.
Indeed, this logo appears to restore Arlington at the final corner, completing the district's original square. Matt DeFerranti, is Arlington trying to tell us something?
No, we are not. This is we. There are versions of this that look somewhat similar to a logo that Arlington Economic Development has used, but this is really about inclusivity. We had a robust process, a great panel that actually went
We're
back,
just
back
teasing
to the
you. We
drawing
don't mean
board.
that for real. But although it would be nice if you had a gondola going across the Potomac River in that logo.
Well, there's certainly been discussion of that. I will say that we are strong supporters. Each of us who's in office and Arlington as a whole is strong supporters in large majority for D.C. statehood, as am I. So,
Well, why are you
that's
so
different from
lukewarm about
rejoining.
the gondola? D.C. officials and one Tom Sherwood are hoping that the creation of a gondola connecting Georgetown to Roslyn, for those of our listeners who are not familiar with this idea, this gondola is still a possibility. The D.C. Council budgeted $10 million to purchase part of an old Exxon gas station in Georgetown, which would be a crucial step for the project. But Arlington seems at best lukewarm, if not cold, about this. Why is that?
Well, about 5 years ago, we put a small amount of money into an analysis of whether this would be in our interests, both as far as transportation and economically. And we just concluded at that point that it wasn't likely in our interests. And I actually feel that it's a touch premature. I got asked about the $10 million and that gas station a few weeks ago. It's not clear from that budget piece whether this, at least to my understanding, whether this could be related to metro or electric vehicles, or actually would be focused on the gondola. And so unless and until there's new information, we're happy to listen, but we're not inclined to invest more time, because the analysis that we saw a few years back led me, in addition to the board at the time, to conclude not quite worth the investment.
Let me talk about a couple of issues that are happening right now that are important. Arlington has joined Fairfax and Alexandria. I think you either passed or are passing a bag tax now that the state has said you're allowed to do that. I think Roanoke City was first. The District of Columbia has one. There's some discussion that all these laws, local laws, should be somewhat similar so that people will not be confused traveling from D.C. to Virginia or vice versa and shopping. But the bag tax is an important environmental thing for this entire region.
Yes, we were pleased we passed it last Saturday. Okay. This is something that we had long wanted, and it's part of why it's so essential, in my view, for there to be a Democratic House of Delegates, which is on the ballot as well. Because in Virginia, we had to get authorization from the state to do this. And Arlington has wanted to do this for over a decade. But finally, we had a change in the legislature in 2019, 2020, it passed. And so we were pleased to move forward. It's 5 cents. I lived in the district when the district implemented what I believe then was a 5 cent tax. And so
2014, Tommy Wells, yes, 2014.
Yeah, and so, I think there was some sort of not apocalyptic, but worries then. And I actually felt it made a big difference near where I lived in D.C. And I feel as though implementation has moved forward. Rivers, if you've ever done a river cleanup, there's plastic bags everywhere. And this is a great step forward for all three jurisdictions.
You mentioned the ballot. Richard in South Arlington sent us an email. Early voting started in Arlington a week ago today. Could you explain just how easy it is to vote early in Arlington?
Absolutely. So there's about 10, 11 different Dropbox locations. If you requested a ballot, you can just walk to those Dropbox, which are all over the county, and drop off your ballot in the secure Dropbox. So that's one option. There's been early voting at the courthouse that started the 17th, and then there will be early voting locations for the full week prior to the November 2nd election. And so there's a number. Those are 3 early voting locations, open 8 to 5. There's Saturday voting on a couple of Saturdays, and we as a board, really, I was part of it, but grateful for colleagues' support who were wholeheartedly in on Sunday voting and the last Sunday leading up, because there's evidence, of course, that can be a great turnout across different states as sort of a pews to the polls type effort.
You're the chair of the council this year. I went back and read your State of the County speech in June. One of the things you talked about is hunger. One of the problems coming from the COVID pandemic, people losing jobs, losing access to various social services. Hunger has the number of people that are being fed by emergency food services in Arlington is up something like 23%, I believe. You created a task force, the council did a task force on hunger. Are you making any dent in the problem?
Well, we are, but it's also the case that our residents have stepped up in a big, big way. Several churches, our Arlington Food Assistance Center, have made a big difference, Our Lady Queen of Peace. There's a number that have stepped up, and we have sought to address. Our schools have also expanded vastly the number of schools that were providing food. Grateful for the federal action to make school breakfast and school lunch year-round. The task force is getting started. We need to do a pretty focused assessment of where and when we're seeing hunger, both pre-pandemic and now that we're sort of working towards the middle, we hope the end of the pandemic. So we've actually partnered with the Urban Institute on that. That's a piece of it. But there's also some collaboration and coordination that this task force is really activating. So the 20-plus members have been a great addition. We got more to do, for sure.
Let me ask you an overall question about Arlington. You have, I think, 250,000 people in your county. I was talking to an economic person who said no matter what Arlington tries to do about housing and roadways and mass transit with bus lines, that the economic forces that are overtaking Arlington are going to do just that. They're going to overtake Arlington with Amazon and all the concurrent development there, the national airport being rebuilt. That you are a losing battle, you become something of a Manhattan despite your best efforts. Is that too gloomy?
It is, in my view. I mean, I think about the 9/11, which has ceremonies which had a particular profoundness and compassion to them. As one instance, I think about we've got an effort to work on a pilot for basic income for Bridges Out of Poverty for 200 families. I think there are real challenges because the 50+% of Arlington that is above our median income, which is top 6, top 5 in the country as far as counties, makes it very difficult to afford rent or to buy a home. We are seeking to address that. I do believe that we can address it, but I don't think it's inevitable. And we have to think about how we are growing because we're going to evolve and grow and change. But we have to be thinking about how we help both the 10% of our community that live under the poverty line, right under $30,000 for a household of 4. And then we also have to think about how it can be possible to work your way up the economic ladder if you're a police officer, firefighter, teacher, or work at a nonprofit in D.C. So challenge for sure, but I do believe if we concentrate and put our focus on racial and economic equity as well as climate change, that we can stay a community where the middle class can thrive.
46 officers have left the Arlington County Police Department this year. That's according to County Manager Mark Schwartz, who brought this issue to the county board. Some have retired. Some have left for other jobs, including at Amazon. Now there are fewer than 300 sworn police officers actively patrolling. What do you think has led to this, and how do you think it should be addressed?
Well, there are a couple of factors that have led to it. One is there's a lot of different police and security government entities in the D.C. area. So some folks have gone to federal entities where it's difficult. It's a real challenge for us to keep up in terms of salaries. Other adjoining jurisdictions have seen, like Loudoun, has seen huge economic growth. And so we're growing as well, but we do need to make some adjustments. The manager asked us for $3 million, up to $3 million as a down payment towards addressing the challenges we face in terms of retention. The problem is not just police officers; it's also mental health in Virginia. There's a decision that the governor made, which I didn't think was a good one. He's made a lot of good ones. I didn't think this was a good one with respect to how we handle mental health. And so that is a real burden for us, as some officers are spending time just in a hospital, which is not what we think is the best way to approach mental health care. So it's not just police. We have to invest also in our mental health counselors, and that's a big need. We think we can address it, but it is a national problem that is particularly acute in Arlington because of some of the challenges of being in this region. So we're going to invest, and I think that's important. We also did have a number of officers quite close to retirement, and some have taken this opportunity. So we're lucky we have well-educated, have a BA requirement and professional officers. We're working to get our department even better, and we're grateful for their work because at any moment we could have our lives in their hands.
You started your career as a teacher, I believe, in Houston. You took a downgrade and became a lawyer. But in the Arlington Public Schools, how is it doing? How is the county doing in dealing with COVID infections? I think your infections are leveling off. But how are the schools doing? There have been problems in schools all around our region and the country with COVID.
Well, that's a great question. It is, in my view, there's the police and mental health challenge over the last month, and then there's opening our schools. And we had a meeting regularly. I have a meeting with the county manager and the superintendent of schools, as well as the school board chair and our vice chairs of each entity. And we had a meeting last week. We don't have, as of that moment, and I haven't heard any changes since, we don't have quarantines that have led to closings of any classes or schools in Arlington. Our positivity rate is down to 3.1%. I think nationally you're seeing the start of a cresting of Delta, but it is still a huge challenge. So we're doing masks. I credit our superintendent and team for the work they have done this fall so far in keeping us open. But it really is essential because if you have talked to a parent in the last year with school-age children, you know how exhausting it has been for them in addition to our teachers. So more work to do, but we're, I think, on a course that is bringing that positivity rate down, and it's really a credit to our citizens.
Well, we got a tweet from Chuck Todd's Goatee, that's the name of the account, which says, "No gondola. Why aren't our elected leaders working to build another bridge across the Potomac? It would benefit everyone in the region and up and down the I-95 corridor."
Well, I don't... that's the first I've thought of it. I don't want to question the goatee. I do appreciate it. Mr. Todd is a resident of Arlington and has been helpful with our community foundation. But I think that I haven't seen a proposal towards a bridge. There is other discussions, and I'm involved on the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, of how we address Metro. But some of those infrastructure decisions that you all have talked about in past shows, of course, with respect to the Roslyn Tunnel, it seems to me first we have to assess what the world looks like post-COVID, which I just don't think we're there yet. But some of those investments with respect to Metro, I want to have, and we want to have as a board and as a community over the coming year or two.
30 seconds left.
Very
Here's
quick,
Tom Sherwood.
would the American Legion Bridge rebuilding of that take care of some of the problems that a new bridge might do?
I think it could. Certainly there are Arlingtonians who go up George Washington Parkway and then use the American Legion Bridge. We have a number of leaders who've been outstanding, Katie Crystal, others. All of our team has been supportive of Metro and that investment, and it's to the governor's credit, really, that we have done it with the governor of Maryland and the mayor of D.C.
Matt DeFerranti is the chair of the Arlington County Board. Matt DeFerranti, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks very much, Kojo and Tom.
And Tom Sherwood, always a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
The Politics Hour with Kojo Nnamdi is produced by Sydney Grannon. Our managing producer is Ingelisa Schrobsdorf. Our broadcast engineer is Rashad Young. Today's engineer was Kenny Pirog. Mana Kashfi oversees all the content we make here at WAMU. For past shows and more content, visit thepoliticshour.org.